I'm Allison, 32, and I just watched my parents hand my sister Amanda a check for $10,000 as a gift toward her house down payment. This is what happens when you make good choices, my father said, looking pointedly at me. They had no idea I'd been secretly saving for years and already owned 2 investment properties worth triple Amanda's dream house. I never told them about my success because they always favored her. As they clinked champagne glasses, celebrating my sister's responsible adulthood, I smiled, knowing next month's family dinner would change everything forever. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, you'll understand exactly what was going through my mind at that moment. Before I continue with how this all unfolded, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if family drama stories like mine resonate with you. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for how this one ends. Sometimes karma comes in the form of a waterfront property. Growing up as the disappointing daughter wasn't just a feeling, it was practically my assigned role in our family of 4. From my earliest memories, there was always a clear distinction between how my parents treated me versus my sister Amanda, who was younger by only 2 years. Our family dynamic was established early. My father Richard worked his way up in banking and measured everyone by their financial decisions and career trajectory. My mother, Eleanor, a former beauty queen who married for security rather than love, valued appearance and social standing above all else. Together they created a household where success was narrowly defined, and I never seemed to fit their definition. Family Sunday dinners were a weekly tradition and the stage for most of my childhood humiliations. These gatherings became a showcase for achievements, but mysteriously, only Amanda's ever seemed good enough. I still remember the dinner after her high school debate victory, how my father ordered champagne despite me making honor roll that same week. My accomplishment went unmentioned. Amanda has such focus, my mother would say. She knows what's important. Meanwhile, I struggled with what I would later learn was undiagnosed ADHD. My scattered thoughts and creative approaches were seen as carelessness rather than a different kind of intelligence. When I showed interest in real estate during high school, bringing home market reports and talking about property values, my father laughed. "That's for people who couldn't make it in finance," he said. "You need to be more like your sister. She's applying for business school." The emotional toll of being less favored manifested in different ways throughout my childhood. I became fiercely independent out of necessity. When Amanda needed new soccer cleats, they appeared overnight. When I needed art supplies, I babysat for neighbors to earn the money myself. I learned early that I could only rely on myself. College was where the pattern became impossible to ignore. While Amanda attended a prestigious university with full parental support, I worked 3 jobs through state college. "We would help more," my mother explained. "But Amanda's education is more promising." The unspoken implication hung in the air. My education was considered less valuable because I hadn't chosen a field they respected. Our personalities diverged further in young adulthood. Amanda followed every rule and expectation, majoring in business like our father wanted. I took risks, changed majors twice, and eventually found my passion in urban planning with a focus on residential development. Amanda called me flighty while my parents nodded in agreement. The most egregious example of the favoritism came during my sophomore year of college. I overheard a late-night argument between my parents about finances. My father's voice carried down the hallway. "We'll just move some money from Allison's college fund to cover Amanda's private school tuition. It's not like Allison's going to finish anyway." The next day, they announced Amanda would be transferring to an expensive private university. My tuition assistance mysteriously decreased that same semester. I never confronted them about what I'd heard. Instead, I picked up a 4th job and applied for additional loans. It was a betrayal I internalized, converting it into fuel for my determination. If I couldn't count on their support, I would succeed without it. By graduation, the contrast between us was stark. Amanda with her pristine resume and no student loans versus me with my hodgepodge of experiences and significant debt. At family gatherings, relatives would ask Amanda about her career plans while asking me if I had figured things out yet. I smiled through it all, the pattern too established to fight against. What none of them realized was that those various jobs had taught me more about real business than Amanda's theoretical education ever could. I'd worked in property management, landscaping, and as an administrative assistant for a real estate attorney. I was assembling the puzzle pieces of what would later become my career, even if it didn't fit into their traditional success narrative. The foundation was set. Amanda, the golden child who could do no wrong, and me, the perpetual disappointment who could never quite measure up. It was a dynamic that would follow us into adulthood, growing more pronounced with each passing year until the day everything changed. Moving out at 22 was both terrifying and liberating. After graduation, the constant comparisons at home had become unbearable. My parents seemed genuinely surprised when I announced I'd found an apartment with a roommate across town. "Are you sure you can afford that?" my father asked, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "I'll make it work," I replied. And I did, though not in the way any of them expected. I started at the absolute bottom of a mid-sized real estate firm, working as an administrative assistant. My salary barely covered rent and student loan payments, but I wasn't there for the paycheck. I was there to learn. Every day, I arrived an hour early and stayed late, absorbing everything about the business. I filed paperwork for agents, scheduled viewings, and eventually started attending them to assist the senior agents. 3 months in, I caught a break. An agent was sick, and a client needed an immediate showing of a commercial property. "I can do it," I volunteered, despite having no official credentials. My boss was desperate enough to agree. The client, a local restaurant owner looking to expand, appreciated my honest approach and market knowledge. He didn't make an offer that day, but he specifically requested me for future showings. That vote of confidence changed everything. 6 months later, I passed my real estate exam. My parents reacted with faint praise when I shared the news. "Well, I suppose it's better than retail," my mother said, while my father added, "It's commission only though, isn't it? That's risky." Meanwhile, Amanda was being congratulated for her promotion to junior account manager at her firm, complete with a family dinner celebration. Everything changed when I met Diane Williams. At 53, she was a self-made millionaire who had built her fortune entirely in real estate. She came to our office looking for an assistant who understood both administrative work and had licensing. I was the only person who fit the bill. Our interview was supposed to last 30 minutes but stretched to 3 hours as we discussed market trends and investment strategies. "You have good instincts," she told me at the end, "but you're working for pennies when you should be building equity." Under Diane's mentorship, I learned more in 1 year than most agents learn in 10. She taught me to look beyond commissions to the real wealth-building potential of real estate. "Anyone can sell houses," she would say. "The smart ones buy them." My first investment came 2 years later. I'd been saving obsessively, living with roommates, and cutting every possible expense. A small foreclosure came on the market, 2-bedroom townhouse, in a transitioning neighborhood. The property needed significant work, but the location had potential as the city was expanding in that direction. I emptied my savings account and took a small loan that Diane co-signed. The anxiety was overwhelming. If this failed, I would lose everything. My family knew nothing about this purchase. My mother would have called it reckless. My father would have listed all the ways it could go wrong, and Amanda would have somehow made it about her. So I kept it to myself. For 4 months, every spare moment went into renovating that townhouse. I learned plumbing from YouTube, painted every surface myself, and networked with contractors who would work for reduced rates in exchange for future business. I lived on ramen and worked 70-hour weeks between my day job and the renovation. When the property sold for a 40% profit, I didn't celebrate publicly. Instead, I immediately reinvested in a small duplex in an established neighborhood, using the profits as down payment. Within 6 months, both units were rented, and I had my first stream of passive income. All this time, my family assumed I was barely getting by. At Sunday dinners, they would offer financial advice I didn't need and express concern about my unstable career choice. I nodded politely, never correcting them. There was a strange power in their underestimation, a freedom to operate without their expectations or interference. Over 5 years, I methodically built my portfolio. The duplex was followed by a small 4-unit building. I sold the 4-unit at a significant profit during a market upswing and purchased 2 single-family homes in prime rental areas. By age 30, my properties were generating $3,800 in monthly passive income after expenses. I reinvested most of it, living well below my means. My career progressed alongside my investments. From Diane's assistant, I moved to a boutique firm specializing in commercial properties, then to a prestigious company handling luxury residential sales. My commissions grew exponentially as my reputation for market knowledge spread. Last year, I was promoted to senior position, complete with my own assistant and office. The irony wasn't lost on me that I now helped clients like my parents find investment opportunities. Several times, I nearly revealed my success to them, especially when my father would pontificate about market trends that I knew were outdated. But something held me back. Perhaps the realization that once they knew, our relationship would fundamentally change. Or perhaps it was the childish but honest desire to finally, decisively prove them wrong. Instead, I compartmentalized. Professional Allison was confident, knowledgeable, and respected in her field. Daughter Allison was still viewed as the underachiever who hadn't found her path. The contrast was stark and sometimes painful, but I had grown comfortable with the dual identity. After all, I knew the truth, even if they didn't. What I hadn't anticipated was how long I could maintain this separation, or what would finally cause it to collapse. As it turned out, the catalyst would be a simple check for $10,000 and my father's condescending smile as he handed it to my sister. The infamous dinner began like any other Sunday gathering at my parents' house. I arrived at exactly 5 p.m., the mandatory attendance time established years ago. Amanda and her husband Ryan were already there, engaged in animated conversation with my parents in the living room. "She's here," Amanda announced as I walked in, with unusual enthusiasm. "Now we can share our news." My sister was practically bouncing in her seat, her blonde hair falling perfectly around her face in a way mine never would. She'd always been the more conventionally pretty one, following my mother's beauty queen aesthetic. "Ryan and I found the perfect house," she announced, her voice rising with excitement. "It's in Oakwood Heights, 4 bedrooms, and the most amazing kitchen you've ever seen." "4 bedrooms?" I asked, genuinely curious. They didn't have children yet. "For the future," Amanda said with a meaningful look toward our mother, who clasped her hands in delight. "And 1 will be a home office." "It sounds wonderful," my mother gushed. "When can we see it?" "We have a second viewing tomorrow," Ryan explained. "But there's just one small issue with the financing." My father leaned forward. "What's the problem?" "The down payment," Amanda sighed. "We qualify for the mortgage, but with only 10% down, we'd be looking at PMI and a higher interest rate." I watched my father's expression shift instantly from concern to resolution. It was a look I recognized from childhood, the face he made right before solving Amanda's problems. "How much more do you need?" he asked. Amanda and Ryan exchanged glances. "About 10,000 would make a significant difference," Ryan admitted. Without hesitation, my father stood up and walked to his office. The room fell silent until he returned minutes later with his checkbook. With ceremonial flourish, he wrote out a check and handed it to Amanda. "Consider it a gift," he said, his voice warm with pride. "This is what happens when you make good choices," he added, looking pointedly at me. My mother disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bottle of champagne she must have been chilling in anticipation. "A toast," she declared, pouring 4 glasses, to Amanda and Ryan's new home, and to finally having grandchildren in a proper house. Amanda accepted the champagne with a gracious smile. "We couldn't have done it without you both," she said, but her eyes slid toward me. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have such supportive parents. I maintained my composure, nodding and raising my glass in the toast. Inside, I was calculating that the property taxes on my waterfront rental alone were more than their down payment. But no one at that table knew that. To them, I was still the struggling real estate agent, living in what my mother called that tiny apartment. "Speaking of which," Amanda continued, turning fully toward me, "how is that place of yours? Still have the roommate to make ends meet?" "Lisa moved out last month," I replied truthfully. I didn't mention I'd kept the roommate arrangement purely to increase my investment capital rather than out of necessity. "That must be tough on your budget," my father commented. "You know, there are still positions at the bank that wouldn't require much experience. Entry level, but stable." I took a long sip of champagne before answering. "I'm doing fine, Dad." "Fine isn't building a future," he countered, gesturing toward Amanda and Ryan with his glass. "Your sister and her husband understand the importance of establishing themselves properly. A house is an investment in their future." The conversation continued in this vein throughout dinner, a carefully choreographed celebration of Amanda's life choices, contrasted with concerned commentary about mine. It was familiar territory, a dynamic established decades ago, and reinforced through countless similar conversations. I thought of the closing documents for my latest property acquisition sitting in my bag, the one I'd signed just 3 days earlier. I thought of the rent checks that would arrive next week, and the equity building in my name while they assumed I was barely surviving. "You know, it's not too late to get serious about your future," my father said as we moved to dessert. "You're 32, but there's still time to establish yourself if you make some changes." The impulse to reveal everything nearly overwhelmed me. I imagined their faces if I casually mentioned my property portfolio or the promotion I'd received last month. But something held me back, perhaps the realization that they wouldn't believe me without proof, or worse, would somehow diminish my accomplishments. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, locking the door behind me and taking deep breaths while staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked successful, confident, well-dressed, with the calm assurance that financial security brings. It was only in this house that I reverted to feeling like the disappointing daughter. I made a decision in that moment. This would be the last family dinner where I played this role. I was done being the cautionary tale contrasted with Amanda's golden child narrative. The time had come to rewrite the story. When I returned to the table, they had moved on to discussing the furniture Amanda would need for her new house. "Maybe Allison could contribute to the housewarming gift we're planning," my mother suggested. "Nothing extravagant, of course, just whatever you can manage, dear." I smiled. "I'll see what I can do." That night, driving home to my tiny apartment, I made a phone call to my realtor. "Catherine?" "It's Allison. I'm ready to make a move on that waterfront property we discussed." "Yes, the one in Lakeside Estates. Make it a cash offer, $50,000 above asking." The neighborhood I'd chosen wasn't just any luxury development. It was the community my parents had pointed out in real estate magazines for years, saying things like, "Now that's success and imagine living there someday." They never imagined it would be me who did. The week following the dinner was a constant stream of reminders about my supposed financial inadequacy. Amanda sent daily text messages about house shopping, each one containing thinly veiled comparisons. "Found the most gorgeous dining table, but it's so expensive. Guess that's what happens when you can afford quality furniture instead of IKEA, lol." My mother called twice with unsolicited financial advice. "Honey, I was thinking about your situation," she began, not bothering to define which situation. She meant, in her mind, my entire life was a situation. "Have you considered taking a personal finance class? The community college offers them quite affordably." Even my father joined in, forwarding an email with entry-level job listings at his bank. The subject line read, "Never too late to start building security. The accompanying message was brief. Starting salary includes benefits. Let me know if you want me to put in a word. I deleted it without responding. The final straw came 3 days after the dinner, when Amanda called with what she clearly thought was a reasonable request. So, Mom and Dad have been so generous with the house down payment, she began, her voice sugary sweet. Ryan and I want to get them a really nice thank you gift. We're thinking about that weekend at the Vineyard Resort they've always talked about. That sounds lovely, I replied, already sensing where this was heading. Thing is, with all our house expenses, we're a bit stretched. We're putting in 800, and I was hoping you could contribute 200 to make it an even 1,000. I know it's a lot for you right now, but they've done so much for us, and well, for you too over the years. I nearly laughed out loud at the audacity. My parents had given her $10,000 days earlier, yet she couldn't manage a $1,000 thank you gift without my help. More infuriating was her assumption about my finances and her revisionist history about our parents' support of me. I'll think about it, I responded, my tone neutral despite my racing pulse. Don't think too long, she chirped. I want to book it by Friday. After hanging up, I sat in my car outside my office building for 20 minutes, processing the anger that had been building for years. I texted Amanda and asked to meet for coffee the next morning. It was time for at least one honest conversation. We met at a cafe equidistant from our workplaces. Amanda arrived 10 minutes late, as usual, looking harried despite her perfect makeup. I can't stay long, she announced, settling into the chair across from me. We have a meeting with the mortgage broker at 11. This won't take long, I assured her. I wanted to talk about the gift for Mom and Dad. Her face brightened. So you'll contribute? Great. I already found the perfect package with champagne included. Actually, I wanted to talk about why you assumed I would contribute. Her expression shifted to confusion. Because they're your parents too? Yes, but they just gave you $10,000. That's different, she dismissed with a wave of her hand. That was for our house. A house you can afford without their help, I pointed out. You and Ryan make good money. Amanda's eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You've always received more financial support from them than I have. College, your first car, now this house. Yet you expect me to contribute to a thank you gift for money I never would have been offered. That's not true, she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. They would help you too if you made better choices, if you had a real career plan, or— Stop, I interrupted, my voice firmer than I'd intended. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This narrative that I'm somehow failing at life because I didn't follow Dad's approved career path. Well, you're certainly not thriving, she snapped. Still renting, no relationship, working on commission. Meanwhile, Ryan and I are playing it completely safe while taking handouts, I finished for her. Which is fine, that's your choice. But stop pretending it's because you're more responsible or deserving. Amanda's face flushed with anger. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me. It's not my fault Mom and Dad see that I'm actually building something with my life. And there it was, the gaslighting technique she'd perfected since childhood. Reframing my legitimate concerns as jealousy, making me question my own perceptions. I'm not jealous, Amanda. I'm tired. Tired of the comparisons, tired of being the family cautionary tale, and tired of you perpetuating it. I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. Figure out the gift without me. I think $10,000 is thank you enough. As I walked away, Amanda called after me. This is exactly why they worry about you. You're so dramatic and irresponsible. I didn't turn around, but her words followed me to my car. For the first time, though, they didn't land with their usual sting. Instead, they reinforced my decision that something needed to change. That afternoon, I scheduled an appointment with my therapist, Dr. Miller. We'd been working together for the past year on setting boundaries and processing childhood dynamics. This session felt different, more purposeful. I think I'm ready to stop hiding my success, I told her after recounting the recent events. What's holding you back? She asked. Fear, I admitted. Fear they won't believe me. Fear they'll somehow take credit. Fear the relationship will change. The relationship will change, Dr. Miller acknowledged. That's inevitable. But is the current relationship serving you? The question lingered with me for days afterward. I also consulted Diane, my mentor, over lunch that Friday. So you're ready to pull back the curtain, she said, stirring her iced tea. About time. You think I should? I think hiding your success has served its purpose. It protected you while you built something of your own, without their interference or judgment. But now it's become its own prison. She leveled her gaze at me. Success hidden is still success, but there's power in owning it publicly. How do I do it without seeming vindictive? By being matter-of-fact. No grand revelations, no scorekeeping, just the simple truth, delivered with confidence. She smiled, and maybe a little style. The following week, I contacted Catherine, my personal realtor. I'm ready to make a move, I told her. Something significant. Investment property? She asked. Already familiar with my portfolio. Personal residence, I clarified. Something in Lakeside Estates. There was a pause on the line. Lakeside is substantial, she said carefully. We both knew the neighborhood was among the most exclusive in the city. I'm aware of the price point, I assured her. Let's schedule some viewings. The search took less than a week. The fourth property we viewed was perfect. A 4-bedroom waterfront home with panoramic lake views, a private dock, and modernist architecture that suited my taste perfectly. The coincidence that it was directly next door to my parents' friends, the Thompsons, was simply too perfect to ignore. This is the one, I told Catherine, standing on the back deck overlooking the water. She nodded, understanding the significance beyond just the purchase. I'll prepare the offer. Full asking price? $50,000 above, I decided. I want to ensure it's accepted quickly. And make it cash, no financing contingencies. Catherine raised an eyebrow but didn't question my ability to make good on the offer. She'd seen my financial statements. If we move quickly, we could close before the end of the month, she noted. Perfect, I smiled, already envisioning the next family dinner. That's exactly what I want. If you've ever kept a secret that was bursting to get out, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Standing on that deck, I knew everything was about to change. Have you ever had to reveal something big to your family? Tell me in the comments how it went, and don't forget to subscribe for part 2 of this story, because the revelation dinner was even more dramatic than I expected. Preparing for the revelation required more strategy than I'd initially anticipated. This wasn't just about buying a house. It was about rewriting a narrative that had defined our family dynamic for decades. I wanted the revelation to be impactful but not spiteful, confident but not boastful. Walking that line would require careful planning. My first step was another session with Dr. Miller, focused specifically on how to handle the inevitable reactions. Your parents will likely experience cognitive dissonance, she explained. The reality you're presenting contradicts their long-held beliefs about you. Expect defensiveness, possibly anger, before acceptance. And Amanda? I asked. Siblings often have the hardest time adjusting to these revelations. She's built part of her identity on being the successful one. Be prepared for her to minimize your achievements or find ways to compete. We role-played various scenarios, practicing calm responses to potential provocations. Dr. Miller emphasized the importance of stating facts without emotional justification. You don't need to explain or defend your success, she reminded me. It exists regardless of their understanding or approval. With my mental preparation underway, I turned to the practical aspects. If I was going to reveal my success, I wanted to look the part. I called my friend Melissa, a personal stylist I'd met through real estate networking. I need a wardrobe refresh, I explained over lunch. Something that says, successful professional without screaming, trying too hard. Melissa studied me thoughtfully. Your current style is intentionally understated. You've been dressing to avoid attention. I hadn't realized how transparent my strategy had been. You're right, I admitted. Let's update while staying authentic to you. No power suits if that's not your personality, but definitely some statement pieces that communicate confidence. We spent a Saturday building a capsule wardrobe that felt like me, but version 2. Quality pieces in my preferred neutral palette, but with better tailoring and subtle luxury details. The transformation was subtle enough that it wouldn't seem like an overnight personality change, but significant enough to be noticed. Next came my professional image. I scheduled photos for my company website and business materials, something I'd been putting off. The photographer captured me in natural, confident poses that reflected my actual success level. I updated my LinkedIn profile with my new title and responsibilities, knowing that mutual connections might mention it to my parents. The house closing was scheduled for 3 weeks after my offer was accepted. I used that time to plan the logistics of my move and how I would integrate this revelation into the family dynamic. I created a detailed timeline to ensure everything would be ready before the next family dinner. A surprising development occurred when my realtor Catherine called one evening. "Allison, the Thompsons stopped by while I was doing the final walkthrough at your new place. Did you speak with them?" I asked, immediately thinking of their friendship with my parents. "Briefly. They recognized your name from the paperwork. Mrs. Thompson mentioned she plays bridge with your mother every Thursday." My pulse quickened. Did she seem surprised? More curious than surprised. She asked if you were related to Richard and Eleanor Parker. When I confirmed, she said she'd have to tell them what a lovely neighbor they were getting. This accelerated my timeline unexpectedly. If Mrs. Thompson mentioned the purchase to my mother at their next bridge game, I would lose control of the revelation. I needed to act faster. I called my Uncle Frank that same evening. My father's younger brother had always been something of an outsider in the family, pursuing a career in art rather than finance. My father considered him irresponsible, despite his successful gallery in Chicago. "Uncle Frank? It's Allison." "Well, this is a pleasant surprise," he said warmly. "To what do I owe the honor?" I explained the situation, including the years of hidden success and my plans to reveal everything. "So you've been living a financial double life," he summarized with obvious amusement. "God, I love it. Richard must have been insufferable about your career choice." "That's putting it mildly," I confirmed. "And now you're about to drop the mic at Sunday dinner?" "Something like that. I was hoping you might be there, actually." For moral support, there was a pause. "You know your father and I haven't spoken much since the argument at Christmas." "I know. But this isn't about him. It's about me finally standing up for myself, and I could use an ally in the room." "When you put it that way, how can I refuse? Count me in." With Uncle Frank's support secured, I turned to the final preparation, creating a comprehensive financial portfolio with my advisor James. I wanted documented proof of my assets and investments, anticipating my father's skepticism. James prepared a professional folder containing property deeds, investment statements, and a net worth summary. "This is impressive work," James commented as we reviewed the documents. "Especially considering you built it entirely on your own." "That's the point I need to make," I said. "Not just that I'm successful, but that I did it without their support or approval." As the closing date approached, I found myself dealing with unexpected anxiety and second thoughts. Was I being petty? Was this revelation necessary? Or was I seeking validation I'd claimed not to need? I discussed these doubts with Diane over dinner. "Having doubts?" she asked, noticing my distraction. "I'm questioning my motivations," I admitted. "Part of me wonders if I should just continue as I have been." Diane considered this. "Would you advise a client to hide their financial success from their family indefinitely?" "No, but most families aren't like mine." "All families are complicated," she countered. "The question isn't whether this revelation is comfortable. It won't be. The question is whether continuing the charade is healthy for you." Put that way, the answer was clear. Maintaining the facade was taking an emotional toll I hadn't fully acknowledged. Every diminishing comment, every dismissal of my career, every assumption about my finances, they all reinforced harmful patterns I'd internalized since childhood. The revelation isn't about them, I realized aloud. It's about me refusing to participate in their narrative anymore. Exactly, Diane smiled. Their reactions belong to them. Your truth belongs to you. The day before closing, I received an unexpected call from Beth Thompson, my parents' friend and soon-to-be neighbor. Allison, dear, I hope you don't mind my calling. Catherine gave me your number. I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood personally. That's very kind, Mrs. Thompson. Please call me Beth. I was so surprised when I heard a Parker was moving in next door. I mentioned it to your mother at bridge yesterday. My heart sank. What did she say? Well, that's the odd thing. She seemed confused and said it must be some other Parker family. When I described you from the photo in the listing agent's office, she still insisted it couldn't be right. There was a pause. I hope I haven't created an awkward situation. Not at all, I assured her, though internally I was recalibrating my plans. I've been keeping my move a bit quiet, wanted it to be a surprise. Oh, how delightful. Well, your secret is safe with me, though I did notice your parents driving by the property this morning. Slowly, twice. After thanking Beth for her call, I sat with this new information. My parents knew something but were in denial. This changed the dynamics of my revelation plan. They wouldn't be coming in completely cold, but rather with suspicions they were actively trying to dismiss. The closing went smoothly the next day. By afternoon, I held the keys to my new home. I walked through the empty rooms, listening to my footsteps echo against hardwood floors. This house represented more than a purchase. It was a declaration of independence, a physical manifestation of the success I'd built in silence. I called the moving company and arranged for my furniture to be delivered the following day. I'd already sorted what would come with me and what would be donated, another step in shedding my old identity. That evening, I sent a group text to my family. Looking forward to Sunday dinner, I have some news to share. My mother replied immediately. Good news, I hope. Life-changing, I responded, allowing myself a small smile at the understatement. The stage was set. In 48 hours, everything would change. I felt ready. Sunday arrived with perfect early autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunshine, and leaves just beginning to turn. I dressed carefully in one of my new outfits, charcoal-tailored pants, a cashmere sweater in deep burgundy, and subtle but real diamond stud earrings. I added my grandmother's vintage watch, the only family heirloom I possessed, as a reminder of my roots despite my transformation. Instead of my usual economy sedan, I drove my recently purchased but rarely displayed BMW to my parents' house. The car had been a practical indulgence after my last major sale, high-end but not flashy. Today, however, it served as the opening statement in my revelation. I parked directly behind Amanda's Audi in the driveway, ensuring my car would be noticed. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the bottle of champagne I'd brought. Not the mid-range brand I usually contributed, but Dom Perignon, Amanda's favorite for special occasions. My mother answered the door, her greeting dying on her lips as she took in my appearance. Allison, you look different. Thank you, I replied, stepping past her into the foyer. Is everyone here already? Yes, they're in the living room. Amanda's been telling us about their mortgage approval. Such a good interest rate for first-time buyers. I smiled, knowing their good rate was significantly higher than what I'd negotiated for my investment properties. That's wonderful. I brought champagne to celebrate. My mother examined the bottle, her eyebrows rising. This is rather expensive. Nothing but the best for family celebrations, I replied, echoing the phrase she often used when justifying expenses for Amanda's milestones. In the living room, Amanda dominated the conversation, detailing the paint colors she'd chosen for each room of her new house. My father nodded with exaggerated interest, while Ryan looked slightly bored. Allison's here, my mother announced, and she's brought champagne. Amanda paused mid-sentence, taking in my appearance with a quick, assessing glance. Wow, shopping spree? That sweater looks expensive. Just updating my wardrobe, I said casually, settling into an armchair. My father studied me with furrowed brows. New car in the driveway, too? That looks like a lease payment that would strain your budget. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. My mother returned moments later with Uncle Frank in tow, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Frank, we weren't expecting you," my father said, rising awkwardly. "Allison invited me," Uncle Frank explained, giving me a conspiratorial wink, said she had some news to share. An uncertain silence fell over the room as everyone recalibrated their expectations for the evening. My mother recovered first, insisting we move to the dining room where dinner was ready. Throughout the appetizer course, Amanda continued her house monologue, now focused on the inspection results and closing timeline. "The mortgage is finally approved, though the interest rate was higher than we hoped. Still, it's your first home," my father said proudly. "A significant milestone." "Speaking of homes," my mother turned to me. "How is your apartment hunt going? Your lease must be up for renewal soon." The opening I'd been waiting for had arrived naturally. I set down my fork and looked directly at her. "Actually, I won't be renewing my lease." "Oh?" Interest sparked in her eyes. "Moving in with someone?" "No," I said evenly. "I bought a place." My father chuckled. "A condo, you mean? Still, it's a start." "Not exactly." I maintained my calm, remembering Dr. Miller's advice about stating facts without emotional justification. "I purchased a house in Lakeside Estates. I close." Well, closed, actually. Friday. The silence that followed was profound. Amanda froze with her wineglass halfway to her lips. Ryan looked confused. My mother's expression flickered between disbelief and concern, as though she feared I'd lost touch with reality. My father broke the silence. "That's impossible. Lakeside is $1 million neighborhood. 1.7 million, actually," I corrected gently. "For my property, at least." "This isn't funny, Allison," my mother said tightly. "If you're having some kind of financial issue, we should discuss it privately." Uncle Frank watched the exchange with barely concealed amusement. "I'm not joking," I continued. "I purchased the Sullivan property on Lakefront Drive. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, private dock. You might know it, it's next door to the Thompsons." At the mention of their friends, my parents exchanged a quick, worried glance. Beth Thompson mentioned something, but we assumed she was confused, my mother admitted. She wasn't. I reached for my phone and pulled up photos of my new home. "Would you like to see it?" I passed the phone to my father, whose hands trembled slightly as he swiped through the images. "This is... How could you possibly?" "I've been quite successful in real estate," I explained, "both in my career and my personal investments." "For how long?" my mother demanded. "I bought my first property 7 years ago. I currently own 2 additional rental properties besides my new residence." Amanda finally found her voice. "You've been lying to us? All this time?" "I never lied," I clarified. "I simply didn't volunteer information about my finances, much like you don't share details about yours." "But that's completely different," she protested. "We don't pretend to be struggling." "Neither did I. You all made assumptions about my financial situation based on your perceptions of my career choice. I never corrected those assumptions. My father had recovered enough to shift into analytical mode. "This doesn't add up. Even with commissions, you couldn't possibly afford Lakeside on your income." I had anticipated this response and came prepared. From my bag, I withdrew the portfolio James had prepared and placed it on the table. "This contains verification of my assets, including property deeds, investment accounts, and income statements from my rental properties. I'm currently generating approximately $45,000 annually in passive income from real estate investments, in addition to my salary and commissions as senior agent at Westlake Luxury Properties." Uncle Frank let out a low whistle. "Well done, Allison." My father ignored him, snatching up the portfolio and flipping through it with increasing agitation. My mother peered over his shoulder, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something I hadn't anticipated, a strange pride that she seemed unsure whether to express. Why keep this secret? She finally asked. Why let us think you were struggling? The question hung in the air. I had rehearsed this moment extensively with Dr. Miller, knowing it would be the most difficult part of the conversation. Because of nights like the one last month, I said quietly. When you gave Amanda $10,000 for her down payment and used it as an opportunity to criticize my life choices, because every time I expressed interest in real estate, it was dismissed as impractical. Because it was easier to build something on my own terms without having to justify every decision to people who had already decided I would fail. Amanda abruptly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is just like you, Allison. You couldn't let me have one special moment without making it about yourself. This isn't about you, Amanda, I replied calmly. Of course it is. You waited until we were celebrating our house purchase to spring this deception on everyone. I waited until I closed on my house, which happened to coincide with your purchase. The timing isn't about you. Everything is always about her, Amanda said bitterly to our parents. She's always been jealous of me, and now she's trying to overshadow our achievement. With that, she stormed out of the dining room. Ryan hesitated, looking uncomfortable. I should, he began, gesturing toward the door. Of course I nodded. As Ryan left to follow Amanda, he paused beside me and whispered, For what it's worth, I think what you've accomplished is impressive. Then he was gone. My father had recovered enough to switch tactics. The market's peaking right now, he said, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used for financial advice. You should consider diversifying some of those property assets into more stable investments. I know a fund manager who— Dad, I interrupted gently. I appreciate the thought, but I have a financial advisor I trust completely. He looked startled, then slightly offended. I'm just trying to help. I know, but I don't need that kind of help right now. My mother had been unusually quiet. Now she asked, When can we see it? Your new house? The moving truck arrives tomorrow. I was planning to have you over next Sunday, if you'd like to come. We would, she said quickly, before my father could respond. Of course we would. She paused, then added with apparent sincerity, I'm proud of you, Allison. Surprised, but proud. The words I'd longed to hear for decades landed strangely, neither as satisfying nor as vindicating as I'd imagined. Instead, they felt like the first tentative step across a new bridge being built between us. My father was still processing, thumbing through my portfolio with the concentration of someone trying to find a flaw in the data. You did all this without any help? Yes. The simple word carried the weight of years of independent struggle and triumph. Uncle Frank, who had been a quietly supportive presence, finally spoke up. Richard, your daughter has built something remarkable entirely on her own terms. Perhaps instead of looking for what's wrong with the picture, you might consider what's right with it. My father looked up, momentarily startled, then nodded slowly. It's impressive, he admitted, the word clearly difficult for him to say. Unexpected, but impressive. We finished dinner in a strange new configuration of our family dynamic. Amanda did not return to the table. My parents asked cautious questions about my properties and career, as though getting to know me for the first time. In some ways, they were. As the evening wound down, I made my excuses to leave earlier than usual. Standing in the driveway beside my BMW, my mother surprised me with a hug. Next Sunday, then, to see the house? Yes, I confirmed. Around noon? We'll be there. She hesitated, then added, Bring the paperwork for that first property you bought. I'd like to hear that story. Driving away, I realized the evening had unfolded nothing like I'd imagined, yet exactly as it needed to. There had been no dramatic vindication, no satisfying collapse of their false narrative about me. Instead, there was something more valuable, the first fragile foundation of a more honest relationship. The old dynamic had shattered, but what would take its place remained uncertain. The revelation wasn't an ending but a beginning, messy, uncomfortable, but ultimately necessary. The days following my revelation dinner brought an avalanche of reactions from my family. My phone vibrated constantly with messages, each one revealing a different aspect of how my disclosure had affected them. Amanda's text came first, arriving at 7:03 a.m. the morning after the dinner. I can't believe you've been deceiving everyone for years just to create some dramatic moment that overshadowed what should have been our special time. This is so typical of you. Always have to be the center of attention. I didn't respond immediately, remembering Dr. Miller's advice to give emotionally charged messages a cooling period before engaging. When I did reply several hours later, I kept it simple. This wasn't about overshadowing you. I'm genuinely happy for your house purchase. My timing was based on my own closing date. Her response came instantly. Whatever. At least now I understand why you were too busy to help with Mom and Dad's thank you gift. My mother's approach was more complex. She called while I was directing the movers at my new house. Honey, I've been thinking about what you said last night, she began, her voice carrying that careful tone she used when navigating difficult conversations. About us dismissing your career choices. Yes? I prompted when she paused too long. I want you to know that we always wanted the best for you. Maybe we didn't understand what that looked like for you specifically, but our intentions were good. It was a partial acknowledgement, wrapped in self-justification, classic Eleanor Parker. I know you meant well, Mom, I conceded, deciding to accept the olive branch for what it was. But impact matters more than intention sometimes. Yes. Well, she cleared her throat. Your father and I are very impressed with what you've built. He spent hours researching property values in Lakeside last night. I smiled at the image. Did he find what he was looking for? He found that you made a very sound investment. He's processing. You know your father. Indeed, I did. Richard Parker processed emotional revelations by converting them into financial data he could analyze. As if confirming my thoughts, my father's email arrived that afternoon with the subject line, Property Appreciation Rates in Lakeside 2015 to 2025. The body contained multiple spreadsheets and a brief message. You bought at a good time. Values expected to increase 12% over next 3 years. Impressive foresight. It was the closest thing to a compliment he could manage at this stage. I replied with a simple thank you. The extended family reactions varied widely. Uncle Frank called that evening, chuckling as he recounted my parents' expressions. I wish I'd had a camera. When you mentioned the Thompsons, I thought your father might swallow his fork. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, sent a confused text. Eleanor says you've bought a mansion? In cash? Call me? I made a mental note to correct my mother's exaggerated retelling. The Thompsons themselves dropped by my new house the next day, with a welcome basket containing wine, artisan cheese, and local honey. We're thrilled to have you in the neighborhood, Beth gushed, peering curiously past me at the boxes being unloaded. When your mother mentioned at bridge that her daughter was in real estate, I never connected the dots until seeing your name on the purchase documents. Thank you for the warm welcome, I replied, accepting the basket. Your parents drove by twice yesterday, Tom Thompson confided with a wink, slowing down to a crawl. I think they were checking to make sure it wasn't some elaborate prank. I laughed despite myself. That sounds like them. As the week progressed, I settled into my new home while fielding continued reactions from my family. Amanda maintained a cool distance, sending passive-aggressive texts about how some people were too busy with their secret lives to help with her moving plans. Ryan, however, sent a surprisingly kind message asking about contractor recommendations for their kitchen remodel. By the weekend, I was reasonably settled and preparing for my parents' first official visit to my new home. I spent Saturday arranging the main living spaces to showcase both comfort and quality, selecting pieces that reflected my actual taste rather than the budget constraints I'd pretended to have for years. Sunday arrived with unexpected anxiety. I found myself straightening already straight picture frames and rearranging flowers that needed no adjustment. The doorbell rang at 11:58 a.m. my father's military punctuality in evidence. I opened the door to find both parents standing awkwardly on my front step, my mother clutching a houseplant with an enormous bow. "Welcome," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. "This is a housewarming gift," my mother announced unnecessarily, thrusting the plant forward. "It's a peace lily. They're supposed to bring harmony to new homes." "Thank you." I accepted it graciously, noting the symbolic choice. "It's perfect for the sunroom." They stepped inside, their eyes traveling around the foyer with its soaring ceiling and waterfall chandelier. My father ran his hand along the banister of the curved staircase, assessing the quality of the woodwork. "Brazilian cherry," he noted. "Solid construction." "The original owners spared no expense on materials," I confirmed, slipping into real estate mode out of habit. "It's beautiful, Allison," my mother whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the open concept living area beyond. "Absolutely beautiful." I gave them the full tour, watching their expressions shift from stunned disbelief to grudging admiration to something approaching pride. My father examined everything with the eye of someone who had studied property values his entire career. My mother lingered in the kitchen, running her hand over the marble countertops. "You could host the whole family for Christmas in this space," she mused. It was as close as she would come to asking if I planned to maintain family traditions now that I had the largest home. "Maybe this year," I allowed, surprising myself with the offer. The tour ended on the back deck overlooking the lake, where I'd set up lunch. As we settled around the table, I noticed my father kept glancing toward the Thompsons' property next door. "Tom mentioned you drove by a few times," I said lightly. My father had the grace to look embarrassed. "We were surprised by the news." "That's one word for it," my mother added, sipping her iced tea. "I still don't understand why you kept this all secret. We're your parents, Allison. We would have celebrated your success." It was the opening I'd been waiting for. "Would you? Truly?" Because when I told Dad I was interested in real estate, he said it was for people who couldn't make it in real finance. My father shifted uncomfortably. "I may have said something like that, but I didn't mean. And when I started as an assistant at the firm, Mom, you told Aunt Patricia, I was just a secretary and probably wouldn't stick with it because I never stuck with anything." My mother blushed. "That was a long time ago." It was. And those were just two examples of many that made it clear my path wasn't valued. So yes, I kept my success private because I needed to build it on my own terms, without constant comparison or criticism. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Finally, my father spoke. "The property on Willow Street, the first investment. It was a risk, buying in that neighborhood before the revitalization was announced." I recognized the question beneath the statement. It was, but I had researched the city's development plans and knew the area was next for infrastructure improvements. "Smart," he acknowledged. "And the duplex on Oakmont?" "The rental income covered the mortgage plus provided positive cash flow from day one." He nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You have good instincts." "I do," I agreed, accepting the compliment for what it was. Perhaps the first unqualified professional respect he'd ever shown me. My mother, less comfortable with financial discussions, changed the subject. "Amanda and Ryan won't be able to move into their house until next month. The sellers requested an extended closing." "That's common right now," I noted, grateful for the neutral topic. She was upset after the dinner, my mother ventured cautiously. I gathered that from her texts. "She'll come around," my father predicted, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. "Amanda decided to stay home, but I'd still like to see the house if that's okay. Outside now." I excused myself and went to the front door, where Ryan waited awkwardly on the steps. "She's still processing," he explained apologetically. "But I wanted to see the place, and maybe get those contractor recommendations if the offer still stands." "Of course," I welcomed him in. "My parents are here too." "Great," he said with only slight hesitation. "I can tell them about our closing delay." As we rejoined my parents on the deck, Ryan whispered, This place is incredible, by the way. Really impressive. Thank you, I replied, unexpectedly touched by his straightforward admiration. The remainder of the visit was surprisingly pleasant. Ryan's presence eased some of the tension, providing a buffer for more difficult subjects. As my parents prepared to leave, my father lingered in the foyer while my mother and Ryan discussed kitchen renovations. That first property, he said quietly. Why didn't you come to me for advice before purchasing it? The question held no accusation, only genuine curiosity. Because I needed to succeed or fail on my own terms, I answered honestly. If it failed, I didn't want to hear, "I told you so." And if it succeeded, I didn't want anyone else taking credit for my judgment. He considered this, then nodded slowly. I might have done the same in your position. After a pause, he added, I may have been wrong about your career choice. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Richard Parker, it was monumental. Thank you for saying that, Dad. As they left, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, We're going to do better, honey. We'll try. Standing in my doorway watching them drive away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also a surprising sadness for what might have been if we'd had this breakthrough years earlier. Yet there was relief, too, and hope that perhaps our relationship could evolve into something healthier. That evening, alone in my new home, I called Uncle Frank to debrief. How did the grand tour go? He asked. Better than expected. Dad almost admitted he was wrong about my career. Almost? For him, that's practically a sky-written apology. Frank laughed. True enough, your father never met a mistake he couldn't reframe as a strategic decision. After a pause, he added more seriously, You know they're going to revise history, right? Give them 6 months. And they'll be telling everyone they always supported your real estate ambitions. I know, I sighed. Mom's already started. She told the Thompsons she always knew I had an eye for property value. Classic Eleanor, he chuckled. But here's what matters. You know the truth. You built this on your own, despite them, not because of them. I did, I agreed, feeling the weight of those words. And maybe that's what I needed to prove, to myself more than to them. After hanging up, I called Diane, my mentor, who had been eager to hear about the revelation. How did the big disclosure go? She asked, without preamble. Dramatic initially, then strangely anticlimactic, I admitted. No grand vindication, just complicated human reactions. That's usually how these things go, she said wisely. Life rarely provides the cinematic moments of perfect justice we imagine. No, but it did provide something else. A chance to rebuild on honest ground. That's worth more in the long run, Diane assured me. Vindication feels good for a moment. Liberation lasts forever. As I settled into bed that night in my new master suite with its panoramic lake view, I reflected on her words. The revelation hadn't been an ending, but a beginning. The family patterns were changing, not instantly or completely, but meaningfully. For the first time, I could see the possibility of relationships based on who we really were, not who we pretended to be. That possibility, more than any luxury home or investment portfolio, felt like the true measure of success. 6 months after my revelation dinner, the dust had finally begun to settle into new patterns. The Christmas holiday, hosted in my lakefront home as tentatively proposed, had marked a turning point in our family dynamics. Though tensions still simmered beneath some interactions, we were learning to navigate our relationships with greater honesty. My parents had indeed created their own revisionist history, as Uncle Frank predicted. At a neighborhood gathering, I overheard my father telling the Thompsons about how he had always encouraged Allison to consider investment properties, conveniently forgetting his dismissal of my early interest. Rather than confront him, I simply caught his eye and raised an eyebrow. He had the grace to look momentarily abashed before continuing his story with slightly less embellishment. My mother had fully embraced her role as mother of a successful daughter, mentioning my career and home to anyone who would listen. What struck me most was how she recounted my achievements, no longer with surprise, but with an assumption that my success had been inevitable. Allison always had an independent spirit, she told her bridge club. as though my determination had been a source of pride rather than conflict. I chose to accept these rewritings as the only way they could reconcile their past behavior with their current pride. Dr. Miller had helped me understand that their inability to acknowledge their earlier dismissal wasn't entirely self-serving, it was also self-protective. Admitting how wrong they had been would require confronting their failures as parents, a painful reckoning I wasn't sure they were capable of facing. Amanda's journey to acceptance proved more complicated. For the first 3 months after my revelation, our interaction was limited to group family events where she maintained a cool civility. Her house closing had proceeded as scheduled, and they moved into their new home in a respectable neighborhood that would have impressed me before I purchased my own property. The turning point came unexpectedly during a pipe burst in their master bathroom that caused significant water damage. With limited savings after their down payment, they faced a substantial insurance deductible they hadn't budgeted for. Amanda called me in tears, clearly expecting our parents to bail them out as they always had. "Have you asked Mom and Dad?" I questioned gently. "They said we need to learn to handle household emergencies ourselves," she admitted, sounding shocked. "Dad suggested I ask you for advice since you seem to have your finances in order." I bit back a smile at the irony. "I can recommend a good contractor who might work with you on a payment plan," I offered. "I don't want your charity," she snapped reflexively. "It's not charity, Amanda. It's one homeowner helping another with a practical solution." There was a long pause before she responded, her voice smaller than I'd heard it in years. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Any of it. Homeownership, budgeting, being independent." Mom and Dad always stepped in before I had to figure it out myself. The vulnerability in her admission cracked something open between us. For the first time since childhood, we had an honest conversation about the different ways our parents' treatment had shaped us, her dependency, and my fierce self-reliance, both responses to the same family dynamic. "Will you help me?" she asked finally. "Not with money, but with learning how to handle things myself?" It was the last request I'd expected from my sister, but it opened a door to a new kind of relationship between us, one based on mutual respect rather than competition and resentment. Over the following months, we met regularly for coffee to discuss financial literacy and home maintenance basics. Without our parents' triangulation, we discovered we actually enjoyed each other's company. My father occasionally asked for investment advice now, though he couldn't help but frame it as getting my opinion rather than seeking guidance. I accepted these small shifts as progress. During one Sunday dinner at their house, he casually mentioned a property he was considering purchasing as an investment. "What do you think of the riverfront development?" he asked, trying to sound conversational, though I could hear the genuine interest beneath. "Overpriced for what you get," I answered honestly. "The flood insurance alone will eat into any appreciation. I'd look at the West Side development instead, better infrastructure planning." He nodded thoughtfully, making a note on his phone. Later, I learned he'd followed my advice, a small but significant acknowledgement of my expertise. My mother's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. She began showing genuine interest in my life beyond my financial success, asking about my friends, hobbies, and even my dating life with unprecedented sincerity. "I realized I don't really know you," she admitted during a lunch just the two of us had started having monthly. "I've been so busy projecting what I thought you should be that I never took the time to see who you actually are." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a recognition, and I valued it for what it was. With my newfound financial security firmly established and acknowledged, I decided to channel some of my resources toward causes that mattered to me. I established a small foundation to fund ADHD research and support programs for undiagnosed girls, an issue that had profoundly impacted my own childhood. I also created a scholarship for young women entering real estate, particularly those without family financial support. Diane helped me establish the criteria, emphasizing potential and determination over traditional academic metrics. The first recipient was a young woman named Jessica, who reminded me so much of myself at 22 that meeting her was like looking into a time mirror. No one in my family thinks real estate is a real career, she confided during our mentor sessions. They want me to do something more stable. I understand completely, I assured her. Sometimes you have to believe in yourself first, before others will follow. Professionally, my success continued to grow. I was approached to join the board of the city's Real Estate Development Council, a position that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. At the induction ceremony, I invited my parents and was touched when they not only attended, but brought a framed photo of me to display on their mantel. "We're proud of you," my father said gruffly as we posed for pictures. Coming from him, the simple statement carried the weight of years of withheld approval. In my personal life, I began dating again, this time with a healthier perspective on what I wanted in a relationship. No longer feeling the need to hide my success or downplay my accomplishments, I found myself attracting partners who valued ambition and independence rather than being threatened by it. One evening, sitting on my deck watching the sunset over the lake, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The revelation that had seemed so dramatic and definitive had really been just the beginning of a longer, more nuanced process of family realignment. There had been no single moment of perfect vindication or justice, just a series of small adjustments, conversations, realizations, and new boundaries that collectively transformed how we related to each other. The family patterns hadn't been broken so much as gradually, incrementally rewritten. I called Dr. Miller to share this insight during our now monthly check-in sessions. "It sounds like you're finding peace with the imperfect resolution," she observed. "I think I am," I agreed. I went into this wanting some grand moment of them admitting they were wrong and me being right. What I got instead was messier but maybe more valuable. Which was? The chance to build relationships based on who we actually are, not who we pretended to be. It's not perfect, but it's real. "And that's enough?" she asked. I thought about the question carefully before answering. Not just enough, it's actually better. Perfect justice is satisfying in theory, but doesn't leave much room for growth. This way, we're all still learning and evolving. A year after the Revelation dinner, we gathered once again for a family meal, this time at Amanda and Ryan's house, which they had gradually made their own. As we shared stories and laughed more easily than we had in decades, I caught Uncle Frank's eye across the table. He raised his glass in a subtle toast, acknowledging how far we'd come. Later, as we helped clean up in the kitchen, he murmured, "You did it, you know." "Did what?" "Broke the pattern. Changed the story. It's not just that you proved them wrong about you. You changed how this whole family functions." I considered his words as I drove home that night to my beautiful lakefront house. The greatest success of the past year wasn't the property portfolio or professional recognition. It was the emotional freedom I'd finally claimed. The liberation from seeking approval I'd never receive in the form I wanted it. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right, about your capabilities, your judgment, and your worth. Everything else was just details. As I pulled into my driveway, I smiled at how far I'd come from that dinner, where my parents had handed my sister a check for $10,000 while looking pointedly at me. The journey from that moment to this one had been complicated, painful at times, but ultimately healing. The real revenge, it turned out, wasn't in the revelation of my success. It was in finding freedom from needing their validation at all. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that family patterns can change, but only when someone is brave enough to break them first. What about you? Have you ever had to challenge your family's perception of you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found my journey meaningful, please like and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Sometimes the most important form of success isn't what you build financially, but what you rebuild emotionally. Thank you all for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you. Until next time.